Good evening, everybody. Sorry about the small delays. Sorry about that. I was not paying attention. I was too busy reading what you guys were saying in the chat and not listening at all to my theme tune music. Sorry about that. Anyway, welcome everybody to another episode of Sunday Night Live. It's Father's Day both here and the United States. So, I mean, for me here, my kids are asleep now, so for me it's not a big deal, but for you guys over in the United States, it's kind of approaching dinner time probably, so I don't want to take you away from your families for for too particularly long. So this is going to be a short show, probably only about 30-40 minutes, something like that, so that you guys can get back to your families. That's my intent, that's my target. So that's what we're going to do. We're going to make it a shorter show. So if you've got Studio One questions, music production questions, get them in the chat now. Your starting gun has been fired. Get your questions in the chat and we will, I'll do my level best to answer your questions. We've already got a couple in there already, so we're going to start with those and we'll go from there. And if further questions crop up, then we will answer those. Okay. And the other thing to say is please don't make duplicate questions. If you've asked a question, I will get to it. And if we run out of time, we don't get to it, you can email your question to me. But for the most part, I'm going to answer your questions in the sequence that I see them in the chat, okay? So you don't need to keep asking the same question over and over again. I will get to it and my moderators will delete any duplicate questions. And that way it just keeps the chat nice and clean, and it means I'm able to make sure that I don't answer the same question more than once and all of that, because I'm going to be following in sequence, so please do not make duplicate questions. So please heed my instructions on this. It's very important to me, because I don't really want to have to ban anybody from the chat, and because that's just not something I like doing. It's not something that I take delight in. So and I want to keep this show a nice, happy, positive place and not have to, ban people. All right, so let's not do that, please. All right, let's go up to the top, see who we have here. Billy Morgan, I think, was first in the door, followed by Rich Cresswell, whose middle name from now on is just because I can't speak today. Carol Drudruziak is here as well. Kevin's Guitar Stories is here, which is awesome. Paul Morgan is here. Dave at Bops NY is here. He says, I'll show up, but no Foley samples. Don't worry, I'm not going to do my fart and burp samples tonight. I'll save those for after show. That's kind of when I do those. Let's see, who else is here? Don Oliver's here, which is pretty cool. I'm glad you're here. And DJ Vu is here, who asks, what is the subject of the broadcast in relation to Father's Day? It isn't, really. It's just an acknowledgement of the fact that it is Father's Day, and to all of you guys who are here, either in the chat or just watching, if you're a dad, or you have a dad, and presumably you do, because you wouldn't have been born otherwise, a very happy Father's Day to you, and to your fathers, and to your fathers' fathers, and so on and so forth. Father's Day is pretty cool. It's a time when we can just honor those that have raised us and brought us into being and made us who we are today. So I have been talking to my dad. I'm one of these lucky guys. I have two dads. So I have talked to both my dads today and acknowledged them and the roles, very different roles that both of them have played in developing me as a person and making me who I am today. So I think it's important to do that. And it's great when, I get treated like royalty by my own kids, which is great. And it actually today was hilarious. My son treated me to a movie night where he converted our lounge into a movie theater, and then we watched one of the new episodes of Star Wars Obi-Wan Kenobi, which I'm actually really enjoying. If you haven't seen it yet, I do recommend it, providing you have at least some background knowledge of the Star Wars universe and kind of the stories of the original trilogy from the 70s and early 80s. If you've got some background knowledge of that, then you'll get plenty out of watching the series. And Ewan McGregor's actually pretty good, reprising his role as Obi-Wan Kenobi, providing you can overlook his accent. If you can overlook his accent because he is like me, he is Scottish, and doesn't do the greatest English accent ever, and providing you can overlook that, he's trying very, very hard to sound like Alec Guinness, understandably considering the fact that Alec Guinness made the Obi-Wan Kenobi role what it is, even though Alec Guinness didn't really enjoy making the movie itself. He was actually quite surprised that everybody loved it, but because he hated it. But yeah, he does a pretty good job at trying to be, kind of embody the Alec Guinness version of Obi-Wan Kenobi. He's just not very good at the accent. But other than that, Andrew Lamb is here. I'm getting merrily distracted. Luke Roberts is here as well. And Music to Motion. I think most of my moderators are here. Some of them aren't, because some of them are actually having, kind of Father's Day stuff as well. Which is cool. And I think I've got to the bottom. Oh no, I haven't quite got to the bottom. I've missed out John, Hawk, and Lollipop Guild, who are both here as well, which is awesome. Glad you guys are here too. Alright, let's get to those questions. I'm going to scroll right the way back up to the top. And it's actually Dave Bops who had the first question. He says, are you or anyone else aware of MIDI latency issues within Personas, i.e. Studio One? Because I don't think a company can be latent. Maybe it can. I'm not sure. I can pretty much record with very little latency. When I add a Studio One instrument, it seems to lag too far off. Okay, we can look at this. We can examine this to see if there is a broad, genuine issue that could potentially be a bug. We can look at that. So let's hop over to Studio One. And I just realized you can't actually see me because the webcam was turned off. So let's put that back on. There we go. All right, so let's go and grab a Studio One instrument. Let's pick Presence, because Presence is pretty cool. And we'll go and grab something that could, something big, something that could potentially have problems. So maybe the PSO, and we'll go a big string section, sustain. Because these are round robin samples. I think they're round robin sampled, and we'll give them a bit of reverb as well. And So I'm not seeing anything there other than the fact that the attack is a little bit on the slow side for these. So maybe let's go for something that's got a little bit more of a percussive sound to it. Let's go for maybe something like the Road Suitcase, maybe. Yeah, bit of Road Suitcase. Why not? I reckon there's about maybe between 2 and 3 milliseconds from my playing here on this keyboard. You know, just it's near instant. Now, if you are wanting to see if you can improve that performance, you need to go to Studio One Options or Studio One Preferences, depending upon kind of what you're using. And if you go to Audio Setup, you can adjust your latency here in this processing tab here. Now, I've got the dropout protection set to low, which basically means it is essentially turned off. It's not really doing anything. And I've got plugin app enabled as well. And as you can see here, the audio round trip is 24.6 milliseconds, which is actually, you know, probably quite a bit. But because I have the low latency Blue Z engaged, this is reporting kind of round about 0 in audio latency. And instrument latency, as standard, would be 22.8 milliseconds, which is loads for an instrument. That is loads. However, because again, I've got this low latency system engaged, it says NA, which basically means not available. So it doesn't actually matter. But I would say it's probably about maybe 2 milliseconds tops, really. But if I changed these values to, you know, maybe something higher, you can see here that these values have suddenly changed, and my Z mode has changed as well, because now I'm using the native low latency monitoring mode, which I'm going to keep going with, because if I change it, you might not hear me. So I'm going to go back to there, and I'm just checking. Yes, you can still hear me. Good. All right, so you can change your dropout protection settings here. You can also change your device block size, because the processing is all kind of dependent upon what you have set here for the device block size. I've got mine set to 256. I could go even lower than that. And this gives you the input and output latency. As you can see here, these values are quite low. If I changed this to still, and as you can see, now that I've gone back to the processing tab, these values are even lower now. But I tend to keep mine at random. It's very fast, but as I start building up instruments and as I start building up audio tracks in a mix, if I've got this value set really, really low, computer can bog down because it's having to work a bit harder. The lower the block size, kind of, the harder it has to work. So there's that. You can adjust these settings, and then that will affect how fast your computer will spit out the audio data that you put into it. You're always going to have latency. There is no such thing as a zero latency system. It doesn't exist on a software level. So software zero latency is impossible. The reason being is because it has to be processed through the computer and it has to be processed through Studio One. Now, hardware monitoring, you can get zero latency, and you can get that on any hardware interface device. So, be that the Studio 1824, which is what I'm using, or if you're using the AudioBox USB 96, if you crank the monitor knob on the AudioBox USB 96, if you crank it one way, you can basically just only hear what is going through the input of the interface. So you're only listening to the interface. You're not listening to everything going through Studio One and coming back out again. So, if you're recording a vocal, or you're recording a guitar, or you're recording drums, sometimes it's a good idea to monitor off the interface and not through the software, so that you get the best latency response, which is, zero latency, because it's not going through the software. Which is actually what I do most of the time. I monitor off the interface. I don't monitor through the software. And you'll see me doing that sometimes when I'm doing let's say I'm doing a vocal track here. So if I set this to audio and we go Vox, and then we go mono and we go input left. And I create this guy. I'm going to turn this off. I never use this button at all, the monitor button. I don't engage it because I'm monitoring direct from the interface. I don't need the monitor button engaged. If I click the monitor button, now you're going to hear me twice. So you're going to hear me through the interface, which is how OBS is picking up the mic. And also, you're hearing it through Studio One at the same time. And it can get a bit of a mess. So I don't do that. I monitor my vocal off the interface. And if I'm playing keyboards, or if I'm playing my bass, I monitor direct off the hardware, which gives me zero latency altogether. And then, kind of adding instrument parts, it's less of a concern. But yeah, I'm not seeing any massive lag. So it could be to do with how fast your computer is able to process the data going into Studio One and then converting that back to audio so that it comes back out of your speakers. So if your computer is not, maybe the fastest, or your device block size settings are set maybe a little bit too high, then yeah, that may give you a larger round trip latency issue. So play around with those settings and see kind of what transpires. Okay, I'm going to go back over here. Alrighty, let's get to the next one. Alright, so Luke did have a question here. He says, is a chapter book and a studio album lyrics, are they the same or different from each other? Well, obviously, we now live in a world where there are such things as audiobooks, which means you can listen to somebody reading a book to you rather than having to read it with your eyes looking at the page. But we also have records on playlists on Spotify, iTunes, and all the rest of it. Plus, we still have CDs. Amazingly, we still have CDs, and vinyl is making a resurgence. So, we listen to records. But certainly back in the day, when I was growing up in the 70s, when you bought a vinyl record, it came in a really nice sleeve, and then you open the sleeve, you take the record out of its little paper wrapper, and you put it onto the turntable, you drop the needle, and you listen to the music. But The sleeve itself had something called liner notes. Liner notes was where the producers and the songwriters would provide the consumer with information about how they made the record, or how, what the songs are about. But you might also get the lyrics for the songs as well. So you can listen to the song playing on your turntable and you can follow the lyrics as they go, which I have found to be really, really an invaluable extra layer of being able to engage with the music, because I go from listening passively, i.e. I put the record player on and I go into the kitchen and I go and cook dinner, to I put the record on and I'm reading the liner notes as I'm listening to the music, or I'm reading the lyrics of the song as I'm listening to the song. And therefore I'm engaging in more than one dimension with the music. I think that's a really, really important thing, to be able to listen actively rather than just passively whilst doing other things. I mean, there's nothing wrong with passive listening, but active listening will help you really engage with the song on a deep level. And I suppose the other common thing between a book and a record or a song is that both can tell stories. So a novel, a fiction novel, is going to tell a story. You're going to have characters, you're going to have plot, you're going to have settings. You can have all of those things that help tell the story. And then in the song, you're going to have similar devices. You're going to have characters, you're going to have personalities, you're going to have a setting. You're going to have, some kind of scene that is kind of hinted at the very least, in the lyrics, that will help you kind of mentally immerse yourself in the song, and kind of engage your imagination. There have been great songwriters who are able to do this in incredibly powerful and detailed ways. Lennon and McCartney were very, very good at it. Becker and Fagan, another great example of it. The Gershwin brothers, Rodgers and Hammerstein. There are plenty of Taupin and Elton John is another very, very fine example of narratives being told in such a way that you're not just listening to the lyrics, you're actually hearing a story being told, and you're hearing about characters and kind of, a story, what happens to those characters. So there are similarities, but there are also differences as well. But that is not a bad question. All right, let's see, what else do we have? John Hawk is asking me how I'm feeling. I would say I'm probably about 95% back to normal, or at least my version of normal. Whatever that is. Whatever my version of normal is, I'm probably about 95% of the way there. I still have a bit of a lingering cough. I'm still pretty tired. Being able to think clearly is a bit more hard work than it used to be. I'm hoping that those are things that are eventually going to pass away, and I will go back to being razor sharp with my thinking, which is something I'm used to. Razor sharp clarity of thought is something I've always had the ability to do, and at the moment I can't really do that. And yeah, I find that particular aspect of COVID disturbing. It definitely is, to me, disturbing. The lingering cough, yeah, it's a cough. I can, it will go, it will dissipate. The thing that I'm probably most concerned about is kind of what it's doing to my ability of, with thinking and cognitive thought and, clarity of thought and good decision making as a result. So, yeah. So, it has meant that the last couple of shows that I have done have been harder work for me, because I'm finding it harder to think and harder to form sentences. And I have never had trouble forming sentences ever. So it is definitely much more of a challenge. Let's see, what else do we have? Billy Morgan says, with pictures and liner notes and even credits. Yes, and even a listing of who the mix engineer was and who the mastering engineer was. You know, those guys are the unsung heroes of what makes a record great. And it's so good that, you know, we have liner notes that will, you know, list who the mixing engineer was, who the mastering engineering was done by. Good point. DJ has a really good and interesting question that I had not really thought about. Why are you keeping an early version of Studio One on your hard drive? Is it about playing older versions of your recordings? No. As you can see from over here, down at the bottom, you can see I still have Studio One 4 on this machine. Studio One 4 is still currently supported by us at Presonus. So I still have Studio One 4 on my computer because, you know, if somebody is reporting something, I need to be able to go and test it. Now, here's the thing. Although Studio One version 4 is still fully supported, you will get technical support if something is going down and you're using Studio One 4. You can still make a support ticket and you will still get help. But here's the thing. Development, which means actually, you know, fixing things and adding improvements and new features is no longer happening for Studio One 4. When Studio One 5 was released, any kind of remedial work or further development work on Studio One 4 was stopped. So there will, you know, if there are bugs that you guys are reporting in Studio One 4, they are not going to be fixed because they were fixed in version 5. Most of the, in fact, I would say all of the outstanding issues that were in 4.6 were fixed in 5.0. So, you know, if you're reporting an issue with Studio One 4, it's not going to be fixed, but more than likely, I would say 99.99% of the time, they have been fixed in version 5. So it would be time to upgrade at that point. But Studio One 4 is still supported. We will still work with you guys if you're having issues with Studio One 4, providing, you know, it's not something that's not going to be fixed. If it's something that is fixable, i.e. there is something on your system that is preventing Studio One 4 from working correctly, we can fix that. And we will fix that. So it's still fully supported. So that is why I still have Studio One 4. I still have Studio One 3 on this computer as well. There's just no icon for it in my tray here, but I have Studio One 3 on here. And I also have Studio One 2, believe it or not, on this computer as well. Studio One 3 will work on the latest build of Windows 10. It doesn't work very well, but it will work. You will find that there are problems with it, but it does actually work on the latest build of Windows 10. It was never designed to run on the latest build of Windows 10, but for the most part, it does work. There are some issues, like there is a little bit of extra latency and there is a little bit of extra lag, and you will encounter things like extra pops and clicks and things that you didn't have before. You know, a little bit of misbehavior, but that's because it was never designed to run on Windows 10 latest builds, because it had been a discontinued, unsupported product, and then subsequent builds of Windows were created. So, but yeah, I still have them. I still have version 2. Sometimes, you know, I will go digging. If like something comes up in Studio One 5, sometimes I can go all the way back through opening up previous versions of Studio One, and I can trace the root of something back to an earlier version, which helps out our QA guys. So that's kind of why I keep previous versions of Studio One on my computer. And they, you know what? Studio One itself, the actual application itself, does not take up a lot of space. So, when there is a new version of Studio One that becomes available, there really is no need to go and uninstall the previous version. It's actually a good idea to keep at least one previous version on your computer. Why? Because if you find that there is a stumbling block that you have with a new version of Studio One on your computer, you can always go back. You have a version of Studio One that you can fall back on. So it's always good to keep at least one previous version on your computer and not just kind of like go, I'm only going to operate the most current version. Maybe not the wisest thing, because you may find that there is an issue, maybe a compatibility issue or something like that. And what you may need to do, let's say you have a plugin that just isn't ready for the new version of Studio One or whatever. But it will work in the previous version. That's fine. You just go back to using the previous version until that plugin is updated and it supports the new version, and then you can go right back. So, it's a good idea to keep previous versions, and they don't take up a lot of space. But that is a good question. Let's see. User Motion says, I think with the new plugin format coming out soon and additionally use of GPU audio processing, latency is expected to be much lower in the upcoming future, right? There's a lot of debate and a lot of consternation about this new kind of using GPU, using your graphics card to process audio. It is a brilliant new kind of invention, a brilliant new way of doing things. It maybe takes some load off your CPU, but not all graphics cards are going to be able to do it. So it means that, if you have a certain NVIDIA graphics card, you might be able to do it. And that's going to exclude a lot of users that don't have that particular graphics card, because it means they're not going to be able to do it. So I don't see it as being something that is going to replace what we have currently. But on certain new systems with the new NVIDIA graphics card, it might give you a little bit of an advantage. I don't think all plugins are probably going to support it, and I don't know that there are very many DAWs that are going to support it either. Certainly not for now, so it might well be worth waiting to see kind of like how this concept develops. It might be something that, hey, is a great idea, but it just fizzles out. A bit like Betamax, Betamax was a great alternative to VHS, but it never took off. Laserdisc was a great alternative to, to what was going to become DVD. Laserdisc didn't really last. DVDs took off. So sometimes new technologies are not necessarily the best solution to a problem. But it's definitely an innovative solution to the problem. And I would say just kind of, take a few steps back and watch this space and kind of see how it develops before you jump into it. For sure. But that's a great question again. Let's see. Thank you, Billy. I appreciate that. That is very kind. I'm just going back through the chat here. Let's see. May just be all of those. Is that against something right? Yeah. I'm still symptomatic. Well, actually, all of my tests are now negative. So, yeah. It's still kind of hanging around, I suppose, but I'm all of my tests now are completely negative. Let's see. REM, does that stand for rapid eye movement? I think it does. But they might be using it to mean something different. Let's see. Many thanks for the extensive reply. DJ, you are welcome. I hope that was helpful for you. Let's see. I think we've got to the end of the chat. Mike at Music to Motion says I have a 1080 Ti, which they say will work, but it's not the best. Yeah, I think that's probably going to be the story for the next wee while, actually, with this whole GPU audio processing concept, because it is brand spanking new, and it's still at its earlier stages, and I'm not seeing widespread adoption of the idea yet. But I mean, who knows? It might actually be the way forward, and it might be the way that audio processing gets done in the future. That, you know, starting off by doing this on the graphics card, maybe what needs to happen is, instead of having a graphics card and a CPU, maybe having a graphics processor, an audio processor that's separate from your CPU. So you have a graphics processor and a separate audio processor built onto your computer that processes audio data separate from your computer. Maybe that's the future. Who knows? I'm not really that kind of prognosticator, I think the phrase is. DJ says, how do you relate to artificial intelligence in music composition and production? That's a really good question. I don't know. I mean, there's L&R. A lot of people call it Lander. It's L&R, as in left and right. Really interesting branding there, I think. Which kind of does automated mixing. And I think they now offer an automated mastering service as well, which is interesting. I don't really know what to think about it, to be honest. I think it's interesting. I think it's good to use if you want to just bang out a master quickly that you can use as a reference. I think it serves that kind of purpose pretty well. Is it going to be the perfect solution and put mastering engineers out of a gig? No, I don't think so, because mastering is an art form just like mixing is. It's equal parts science and art. There's as much science in it as there is a creative process for both. So whilst it might be useful to have an algorithm that takes care of the science side of mixing, i.e. frequency, balance, and all of that. There is a very definite creative, artistic side to mixing and mastering that I don't think you'll ever get artificial intelligence to do justice with. I think in the future, artificial intelligence will do extraordinary and incredible things, especially with CPUs that are able to learn. So they will apply scientific method in their algorithm, in their programming, that will enable them to learn something. So maybe you could stick a tenor saxophone in the hands of a robot, and then the robot will go and learn how to play it, and then give it a short period of time. You can put it on a stage with a band, and it can play, Cherokee at 340 beats a minute and actually play something really creative, improvisational. Maybe that's kind of part of the future. I mean, Japan and China seem to be kind of at the pinnacle, the forefront of that kind of creative thought with developing robotics. So who knows where it's going to go. I think it will be interesting, though. What about this new clap plugin technology? Somebody really ought to have thought very carefully about clap when they were thinking about branding this plugin technology. Because that can mean different things. We'll leave that right there. Mike is going to launch a Zoom, which is awesome. Because I have not touched my cup of tea. So, Secret Scroll says 1818 VSL still provided support by Personas. It's an elderly device. It's discontinued, and certainly the VSL aspect of it no longer exists. That's been gone for maybe nearly 10 years, actually. And the reason why the VSL, the Virtual Studio Live software, was discontinued because Apple did an update for macOS that broke it, and there was no way that we could repair it. It just isn't going to work on this particular build of macOS, and going forward, it's just not going to work. And it's not fair, therefore, to allow it to continue for Windows customers, but not for Mac customers. So we made the decision, it's time to retire it. So that's what we did. We retired VSL. So the 1818 basically just works like an audio box now. There was a driver released for it a little while back, and I think that might be the last one for the 1818. But as I said, the 1818 is an elderly device now. It may not work with Monterey or what was the name of the previous macOS? Can't remember. But yeah, I'm not sure that it will work particularly well on Monterey. Because I don't think the latest build of Universal Control supports it anymore. Millennial must have chosen that. Yeah, I think you're probably right. There we go. I think that's pretty much it. I think we've reached the end of the show. So, thank you everybody for coming and for joining me on this Father's Day special show. It's been really cool. I really appreciate it. You guys are awesome, and the questions have been really good as well. But yeah, I am totally accepting of the fact that we have a smaller gathering tonight. In fact, we have peaked at 14, which is like maybe 10 short of where we would normally be. And, it's Father's Day. I wasn't expecting a big crowd. So, I will see you guys on Wednesday for Songwriting Simplified. Venue to be confirmed. It'll either be here or it'll be on Jonny Gibe's channel. Because there are some family issues that are ongoing for him at the moment. But hopefully it'll be over on his channel, which would be pretty cool. So happy Father's Day to all the fathers out there, and I'll see you guys all on Wednesday. Good night. I have to find my end screen. There we go. Cheers, folks.